When you think of the Mughal Empire, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most people, it's the Taj Mahal, right? But that absolutely stunning monument, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. We're about to dive into the story of a vast, complex, and incredibly powerful empire that shaped the Indian subcontinent for more than 300 years. So let's go beyond the marble and see what it was all about.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to break it all down. First, we'll get into who the Mughals really were. Then, we'll look at how they managed to run a massive empire. We'll explore the incredible economic engine that fueled all their splendor, check out their lasting legacy in art and architecture, and finally, we'll look at the great unraveling that led to their fall.
All right, first up, let's tackle the most fundamental question of all. Now, this might seem like a simple question, but the answer is actually fascinating. It gets right to the heart of their complex origins, and it's a blend of two of the most legendary conquerors in all of history.
So the name Mughal itself is a big clue. It's just the Persian way of saying Mongol. But here's the twist. The founders weren't the Mongols you might be picturing from the steppes. They were actually what we call a Turco-Mongol dynasty. They had this incredible heritage, the raw, unstoppable military might of the Mongols on one hand, and the super-refined cultural and administrative traditions of the Persian world on the other. It's a powerful combination.
And the man who kicked it all off was named Babur. I mean, talk about a family tree. He was descended from the conqueror Timur on his father's side and Genghis Khan on his mother's. Ambition was basically in his DNA. After getting pushed out of his homeland in Central Asia, he set his sights on the riches of northern India. And in 1526, at the Battle of Paniput, his much smaller army totally crushed the massive forces of the Delhi Sultan. What was his secret weapon? Gunpowder. He brought cannons and firearms, using Ottoman-style tactics that were just a complete game-changer on the Indian battlefield.
Conquering an empire is one thing, but actually running it day to day, that's a whole different beast. And the Mughal solution was a brilliant, well-oiled administrative machine.
They built this incredibly efficient bureaucracy. You had the emperor at the very top, of course, and his authority flowed down through these powerful central ministries, then out into the provinces, which were broken down into districts, and finally all the way down to the local village level. This super-centralized system was absolutely key for keeping control over a huge and diverse population. And maybe more importantly, it was the key to collecting taxes with, let's just say, ruthless efficiency.
But let's not forget what was holding all of this organization together: sheer military force. In fact, historians have a special name for empires like this. They call the Mughals a gunpowder empire, and for a very, very good reason.
See, the Mughals were one of the three great Islamic empires of the era that totally mastered these new technologies of war, right alongside the Ottomans in Turkey and the Safavids in Persia. They used cannons and firearms with devastating effect, even borrowing tactics from their Ottoman friends. But they also innovated, developing things like metal rockets specifically to freak out and scatter enemy war elephants. This military dominance was the absolute bedrock of their power for almost 2 centuries.
Of course, all that military hardware and those magnificent buildings, they had to be paid for somehow. And the Mughal economy wasn't just big, it was, and I'm not exaggerating here, a global juggernaut.
Just look at this. Around the year 1750, as the Mughal era was nearing its peak, the Indian subcontinent was responsible for producing roughly 25% of the entire world's industrial output. Let that sink in. 1/4 of everything manufactured on the entire planet. This wasn't some quiet corner of the world. It was an economic superpower whose goods were desired everywhere.
And what powered this economy? A massive population. By the year 1700, the empire was home to nearly 160 million people. To put that in perspective, that was more than the entire population of Europe at the time. That gave them a huge base for both production and, of course, taxation.
Now, while agriculture was the foundation, here's what's really amazing for a pre-industrial society. Manufacturing made up a whopping 18% of the economy, and the service sector was strong too. This tells us that this was a highly sophisticated, really balanced economic system, not just some simple farming empire.
So, the engine of all this wealth had a few key parts. The Mughals created a standardized tax system, and crucially, it had to be paid in silver. This unified the economy in a big way. They built huge road networks to make trade easier, and their manufacturing was just world-class, especially when it came to cotton textiles like muslin and calico, which were in crazy high demand from Europe all the way to East Asia.
All of that incredible wealth led to a true explosion of culture, art, and architecture, leaving behind a legacy that is just as breathtaking today as it was centuries ago.
And of course, there's the Taj Mahal.
Built by Emperor Shah Jahan as a tomb for his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal, it really is the ultimate symbol of Mughal power, wealth, and artistry. I mean, UNESCO calls it a masterpiece of the world's heritage, and you just can't argue with that.
But here's the thing, the Taj Mahal wasn't some kind of a one-off project. The Mughals were unbelievably prolific builders. They stamped their legacy all across the subcontinent with these massive red sandstone forts in Agra and Delhi. They built entire new capital cities like Fatehpur Sikri and created stunning tombs and gardens from Delhi to Lahore. This legacy wasn't just built with stone and marble, though. It was a fusion of traditions. The Mughals brought this very sophisticated Persian culture with them, and it became the language of the court. But instead of just forcing it on everyone, they allowed it to mix and mingle with local Indian traditions. And this amazing fusion gave us new languages like Hindustani, totally unique styles of painting, and of course, the rich, complex flavors of Mughlai cuisine we still love today.
But as we know, like all great empires, the Mughal Golden Age couldn't last forever. The 18th century saw a decline that was both rapid and incredibly dramatic.
And if you want a snapshot of the chaos, look no further than the year 1719. In less than a single year, count 'em, 4 different emperors sat on the throne. This wasn't just political instability, this was a total meltdown at the very center of power, with emperors becoming little more than puppets for powerful nobles.
So, what happened? Well, it was a perfect storm, really. You had a series of weak rulers after the last great emperor, Aurangzeb. This led to endless, bloody wars of succession that just bled the treasury dry. The empire had simply gotten too big to manage, especially with these incredibly costly wars dragging on for decades in the south. Then, a devastating invasion from Persia saw the capital, Delhi, completely sacked in 1739. All of this created a massive power vacuum, which rising regional powers and, you guessed it, European traders like the British East India Company were more than happy to fill.
And the result of all this? A collapse that was just shockingly fast. At its peak, around 1700, the empire covered almost all of modern-day India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Just 60 years later, the emperor's actual authority had shrunk to basically just the city of Delhi and its immediate surroundings. The final nail in the coffin came after the Indian Rebellion of 1857. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, had become a kind of symbolic figurehead for the rebels. He was captured and then exiled by the British. And just like that, one of the world's greatest empires was officially over. So from this stunning rise built on gunpowder and pure ambition to a golden age of unbelievable wealth and culture, and then a rapid, chaotic collapse. The story of the Mughals is just such a powerful lesson in the cycles of history. And it leaves us with a question that people have been asking for centuries. What is it that makes even the greatest, most powerful empires eventually fall?